Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. When I started the podcast, I had a name at the top of my wish list for guests that felt very ambitious at the time. And that name, of course, for someone who's got 22 years experience in the retail industry, was Mary, Queen of Shops herself, Mary Portas. And she was my number one guest that I would love to have on the show. And I'm very delighted to say that in today's episode, which is number 88 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan, we are going to be talking to Mary Portas and Nicky Chenery from Safety Culture. We're going to be discussing all about sustainability and how independent retailers can take their first steps towards making a difference and some really concrete actions that they can put into place. Hi, I'm Catherine Erdley. I am the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, as well as your host for this podcast. And if you go to resilientretailclub.com and use the code 10podcast, you can get £10 off your first month. So there's lots of really great stuff in this episode. Both Mary and Nicky talk a lot about the small changes that businesses can make to really fulfill their obligations to not just profit, but people, planet, and profit in that order. Okay, so Mary, thank you so much for your time. And you've really emerged as a figurehead recently for a better way of doing business, with first Work Like a Woman, and then also your latest book, of course, Rebuild, which focuses on what you've dubbed the kindness economy. So a big part of the kindness economy, of course, is rooted in businesses looking after people, planet, and profit in that order. So can you talk to us a little bit more about how independent retailers in specific can focus on creating and hitting their sustainability goals?
See, the kindness economy is just doing better all round. And I think so many people, when the minute you put sustainability goals in front of them, it just becomes such a big ask and it just feels so huge.
Yeah.
So first of all, I say to small businesses, which make up an extraordinary amount. I never realised this, you think I would, but I think it's something like, you'll know this being a Forbes journo as well. But it's nearly 90% of businesses today are small, medium enterprises, which is astonishing, isn't it? When we hear the only reporting we hear of the big industries, and yet the employment and how many people are employed by SMEs is extraordinary. So yes. I think the most important thing for me is don't see this as a big, undertaking. Breathe, don't panic. The fact that anyone's listening or reading the stuff means you're interested in this. And I think, first of all, I always say you don't need to start out by defining some enormous purpose. And when that's the buzzword at the moment, which is sometimes can sort of think, yeah, well, I've done that. I'll put that in the drawer. That'll be safe now. But it's everything you do. Sustainability, of course, is key. We know what the sustainability goals have been set out, especially in this country. But I mean, we need to go bigger. But really, the most important thing I'd say is, and I take this from my Buddhist nun, Pema Chodron, who just says, start where you are. So first of all, just saying to yourself, I really want to create a better business that works for me, for my community, for my people, and for my planet. And I think that, first of all, sort of making that commitment. I mean, you don't need an extra bed to do it, but I often think with, you as the individual, and then looking at how you apply that, the ripples that come from you, what happens is you organically start to behave in a different way. Now, I know that sounds a bit highfalutin, but it's not. Rilke made a beautiful quote of this once, and he said, and I'm going to be much worse at saying what he said, but it was about Don't answer all the questions, just sit with them, and maybe you'll find yourself walking into the answer someday. And it's really wonderful that when you know, how do I want to, putting that at the heart of what you do. Now, that's a kind of purposeful feeling. Then I think, think about your relationships with the people you do in business. And who are the suppliers? Who are
Yeah.
your partners? Who are you working with? And I call them partners, not suppliers. Think of the relationships, not transactions. And when you start to do that, and you start to think about every part, the ripple effect that comes from you, then you start to question and go and look at how they're behaving, and you start to build the picture for your business. And I also say people, not staff, and customers, not consumers. Language matters. It's all building up to you shifting your dialogue to actually looking and putting humanity at the center of all that you're doing. Then working with those partners and people to say, right, here's the goals for us sustainably. How do you think we can achieve this? So that they are coming on board with you. And slowly but surely, you start to build those steps forward. And in the words of Rilke, you start actually living the answer.
Right. Yeah, there's so much in there. I mean,
I know.
It's a lot of what I've been talking about throughout the pandemic. It's not B2B or B2C, it's H to H, human to human. It sounds exactly like that. It's that very human-centered approach, that very much, who am I interacting with? How are they behaving? Even just asking questions is incredibly powerful, isn't it? Just if you ask your partners what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is our goal. We want to, and you might find that you don't work with them in the end. You might think, okay, and slowly but surely. But I think also giving authority and agency and trusting the people that you have in your business, might only be 2 of you, might be 3, might be 10, and actually making decisions together is really powerful. I love Timpson's culture of putting people first. It runs through the entire company. Yeah. When you start to realize that business is about the human interactions, I love your H to H, I might nick that one. I think then you start to behave in a human way. I did a talk at the Women of the World Festival last week, talking to lots of women and men in the audience, and I remember a chief exec who firing in a business I worked in, one of the directors, and saying to him, "Don't take this personally, this is business." And you're like, sorry? Actually, that's what we need to start doing, is taking it personally.
Yes.
And looking at who you're giving back to. Could you partner with charities? Could you better get what tiny tweaks can you start to make? And that starts to guide you. And once you start it, you're on it, instead of putting up this big place that I need to be ultimately completely sustainable, because it's practically now impossible at the moment to get to that place completely.
I love that. Start where you are and then take the steps that you can, and even asking the right questions. And no, I totally hear. And it's funny because I was reading I Work Like a Woman, and everything you said, I mean, I worked in the retail industry, big retailers, for 17 years. So that culture that, exactly as you said, that it's business, there's almost like seems a sign of weakness, to have feelings and to take things personally. It's so personal.
Yeah, and papering over the cracks. I mean, there was a brilliant Harvard psychologist who's much more clever than me, Susan David. She talked about emotional agility, which I love. And she came up with this idea, the tiny tweaks principle, the idea that small changes in behavior feed back into more changes and gradually accumulate. And, I'm glad that you've been in the retail business, because you'll know what we've all come from. The end goal was sell as much and make as much profit. And actually, we all had to change shape in order to fit into that. And what we did was we lost a lot of humanity on that journey. But I think this is, and I think we need to use different language in business. Why can we not use humanity, spirituality, kindness, love? Things that would have been said were the soft skills, but let me tell you, they're the hardest skills to do. To actually really listen to someone, to really empower someone. It's really changing your mindset and about changing your heart towards the fluidity of the world. That is much more scary than the rigidness and control that was in business. So, don't think of yourselves as a bunch of softies. Just think of yourselves as a bunch of people doing business with a heart right at the center of it.
I think that's one of the reasons I just love working with small businesses so much, is because so many of them do start with that real purpose and that real heart-led. And I think that brings us on nicely to, of course, talking about better businesses. So recently you announced that you're now co-chair of the Better Business Act. I'd love for you to explain for people who might be listening to the podcast a little bit more about it and how they can join in, because it's a real movement, isn't it?
It's a real movement. So I kind of, I've always tried to affect policy change. When I did my High Street report 10 years ago, I actually started to write about the power of community. I wasn't looking about how do you, get as many retailers onto high streets to, give us good returns to landlords, basically,
Yeah.
which has been the business model for years. And I talked about community and the social infrastructure and how much that social progress that creates to the people living there and that sense of security and so forth. And, and I don't mean this in an egotistical way, but, 10 years ago, they didn't get that. They just didn't get that. That's not what it was about, and I was asked if I'd had meetings with all the chief execs who were making a mint at the top of businesses. And I kept on saying to the MPs, this isn't really what this is about. And fast forward, we're in a world today where we are still seeing businesses abuse our planet, abuse people, and make us feel that actually, quite frankly, that we're not good enough for not following the codes of what business that's been set out, actually over the past 40, 50 years. So the Better Business Act is simply this. And here's the thing. If we continue, and I talk about it in my book, Rebuild, if we continue to focus on growth, which is probably the major tenet of capitalism, we know that growth is killing our planet. And actually, therefore, it's like anything where you talk about growth and you talk about wellness. You want your kids to grow to a certain size. When they go past sort of like 7 foot, you go, hang on a minute, this isn't maybe that good. Width-wise or height-wise, Kate Rayworth talks about this in the donut economy. And you realise growth is healthy to a certain extent. And I rather think of the words of thriving. So how do we create thriving businesses that give back to communities, that respect the planet and respect the people who work with them or buy from them, whatever? So in the Business Act, we're trying to get one tiny clause changed. And that tiny clause is a clause that's 172, where effectively it says that the role of business is there essentially to give profit, make profit, for shareholders and the main board. That is actually essentially, and has been since 2006, the Companies Act. We're saying, can we change that little clause? Can we say that the role of business is just to make profit, but it's also to take into consideration all stakeholders, which are the community, the places where they are, the way that they respond to the physical places and how they're using our planet, and actually creating social progress for the people and communities they affect. It's actually just a no-brainer. Why would you not want to do it?
Yeah.
So we've got over 1,000 have signed up, some great names, some interestingly going, we want to do it, the chief execs, but our shareholders won't let us. So that tells you what sort of shareholders they've got. Yeah. So that's effectively it. And you can go to the Better Business Act, you'll see it.org online, sign up. I'm doing a day at Westminster on the 20th or 22nd of April, I think it is. I'll have to get that, where we're pushing Parliament so this actually becomes a change in law. I'm very excited about it. Let me give you that date. Is it it's the 22nd of April, which is Earth Day.
Perfect.
Yes.
So on Earth Day, there'll be a day in Westminster. And is there a certain number of businesses that you want to get signed up, or is it just the more the better, the more people who sign up?
The more the better, and I've just done a great one with the big, Watch the Switzerland group, great guy who's chief exec of that, has started a foundation on how to give back. It's a lovely thing he's doing, which I love. He's saying wherever we have a Watches of Switzerland, where people can go and afford to buy, and he has the group, Mappin and Webb, Goldsmith, something beautiful. We're going to create food banks and give back to people in those areas as well. So I love that. Saying we know that there are people who can afford this, but there's also, we are in your area, we are taking up space physically where you live. How about we give something back? I love it. So there's lots of wonderful ways that people are doing. Do join. We need this. We need it for the world.
I think that's the thing that really struck me recently is just how many businesses of all different sizes were had this sort of huge outpouring of support for Ukraine, the number of people who were raising money or selling products with a percentage of sales going to support the Red Cross, for example. I really feel like I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. There's been a shift as well in terms of the expectation of people. I think that as customers, we are beginning to hold our companies a bit more accountable, would you say?
I think that's a very good question. Of course we are. And I think I call it the double V. You know, we want value, but we want people to share our values. And I talk about, instead of buying from, buying into, you know, and it's lovely. You know, those businesses and brands that you really like. And you know, when you've done a little bit about, you've bought too much and it feels a little bit uncomfortable and you kind of know their policies aren't great. And we all do. We all have a little bit, we go, yeah, but I really love that top. And we sort of close our eyes to where it came from or whatever. And, you know, it's just, I think we're more and more aware. Businesses are more aware because the demand is coming from people. And, you know, I talk about this again, there's pressure groups that make change happen, whether it's Greta Thunberg taking to the streets, whether it's the Me Too movement, whether it's the Black Lives Matter. Actually, there's this wonderful outrage, but optimism at the same time for a better future. And I love that. You know, I love being a bit of a rebel capitalist myself, saying, actually, not to be on board this, you're all a bit of old dinosaurs. You know, this is the future. This is the future. And when you start to look at where investment's coming from, it's coming into businesses that are looking after our planet. So if you're not on board with it and you're just going for a quick, fast buck, A, don't be listening to this podcast, and B, fine, but, you know, sleep well at night.
No, that's so true. And I think that the real shift for me has been in the last 10 years. It used to be, you know, back in 2012, I worked for an organic baby clothing and skincare company. And at the time it was seen like, oh, you're doing something really good because you're being, you know, you're thinking about the environmental impact. And I think now it's seen as something really bad if you're not. So I think we've really shifted. And I think even now to the point where people want to see businesses almost being, like you say, regenerative, giving back. It's almost not just good enough to not do harm. I think the next phase will be they want people to give back, which I think is exciting. I think it's wonderful to see what business can do as a force for good.
Yes, and I don't even care whether they're feeling it, business is under pressure, but they don't, you know, that deep down they still ought to be making a bigger buck. I don't care, as long as we as people, and that's where change is going to come from. It's going to come from us. And here's the thing, you know, often I get, and I said this at the Women of the World Festival, you know, so much buying decision and how we live and what we choose to buy and how we are is dictated by women. Nearly 80% of buying decisions. We have the power. We really do, to change our world, definitely around consumerism.
Nicky, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, good morning.
Would you like to start us off by introducing yourself and safety culture?
Yep, sure. I'm Nicky Chenery, so I'm the General Manager of Safety Culture, looking after the EMEA region.
Wonderful. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about what Safety Culture does and specifically your latest initiative to help around sustainability?
Yeah, for sure. So Safety Culture, we currently work with around 28,000 customers globally, very passionate about the retail sector. And we've really got an operations platform now. We started off actually in checklists. So initially digitizing any kind of paper process, which obviously plays really well from an environmental play as well. The platform's evolved quite a lot since then. And even when you're actually doing your checklist, you can raise actions live at that time. Another part of the platform that's been developed is around issues. We're very much around empowering the frontline worker. So this allows people to raise perhaps hazards or incidents and near misses prior to it happening, rather than it being something that's reported after happening. So that's one of the things. And then alongside that, we acquired a separate business, which is EdApp, and part of our platform now. And this is a micro-learning platform, which really ties in really well. So when you see these non-conformities, that literally you can identify if there is kind of a learning requirement there, and then get that done at the time. Or alternatively, you know, it transforms classroom learning, really. Short micro learning platform that really lands very well with a lot of customers. I mean, with regard to our passion for retail, it's one of our largest kind of sectors. And we've worked with retail for a long time around different things. And it can be anything from loss prevention to risk assessments to store openings. But one of the passions of mine has been really around probably, due to the economic fallout and that retail have faced since the pandemic is how can we make a real impact to get these businesses back on their feet? And this initiative is around sustainability, which, as you know, sustainability is such a broad word. But one of the things we're identifying is, what does that mean to the retail sector? And whether that be reaching carbon zero goals, which is not a nice to have conversation any longer. This is real, and we've all got a responsibility. And then the other real passion of mine currently is around how we really help people through this energy price crisis, really, and the soaring costs.
So you have this tool, iAuditor, and is the idea that you can effectively work through ways that you can save energy, ways that you can improve your sustainability. So it's something really concrete and tangible for retailers to do.
Absolutely. And one of the things with the tool is we don't restrict usage. And I think the way this plays really well into the SME space is that this initiative will allow you to use a team of 10, obviously free of charge. After that, if you want a broader team, obviously we can help people through that, but you get full access to the tool. And the one thing that we've put together is we've always been really, really passionate about enabling our customers to put their content together and to build checklists that are appropriate to them.
Yeah.
But what we found is with sustainability, it's where to start. People are very lost on how they get to begin this journey. And so what we've done is we've put more of a prescriptive kind of offering together. So they will get access to some really great content, which means that they can download these templates, they can personalize them. It will offer them things like iOS standards, and whether that's across 14,001 or 50,001, which is more of an environmental play, they'll be able to do that. Things around waste management, things around short checks. It's around being able to change and build micro habits within a business that are going to make really great decisions for them later down the line. And some of the other things we're looking at is kind of temperatures in rooms. We have people using sensors, for example, and that data feeds back into the platform as well. And instantly, some of the customers we were working with realized that the rooms are just heated either overnight or far too long. And actually, in this current climate, switching heating off for 12 hours makes such an impactful difference. So it allows you to see these insights very early in the process, react a lot quicker, and make these changes on the fly. That's where the beauty is in using the platform and moving across to like a digital technology from paper.
Yeah, for sure. And this could work equally as well if you're a physical retailer with a store, or if you're an online retailer with a studio or a warehouse, or any time that you see you've got those frontline workers.
Yeah, and we saw this pivot right through the pandemic. Stores closing and some really interesting use cases came out of that, where buildings were left unattended for up to 12 weeks. And there were scares around Legionnaires because people hadn't been in and done store checks or flushed a toilet through, for example. Like, there's just so many shortcuts that you can use the tool for just to keep compliance good. But when we saw the shift across and like online retail saw to a degree, this was around keeping frontline workers safe, for example, making sure that they had they were taking on a lot of temporary staff. How do you train them quickly when you've not got a classroom environment? So there's so many different elements to that, but empowering the front line is so important. We hear so much. I think, we worked with Forrester, we did a survey, and like 67% of workforces still feel unheard. And this tool really takes that away, because it does allow you to have a voice. The main thing is that your workforce comes in safely and returns home safely. And that's where we're trying to get to, whilst, allowing you to increase your brand, reduce your risk overall, and get better results, really.
Yeah, no, I think that it sounds like it really combines two of the key elements, which is number one, systematizing your business, which is so difficult, I think, when you're a fast growth small business, knowing, like you say, knowing where to start, actually putting those processes into place so you can replicate things like best practice onboarding and safety and everything else. But then also I really like the fact that you've got these checklists, but you're giving people a place to start. And I spoke to Mary yesterday and she was saying, start where you are. That's the kind of key, but it's which is great. It's just, I suppose sometimes it's like, well, where am I?
Yeah.
And just being able to really hone in on that and just be able to say, right, okay, here are 10 things that we can do as a team to improve our environmental impact. But also, you're absolutely right. That's the thing with the current cost of energy. It's lessening your impact is also massively helping you from a cost perspective as well. And I know that's something a lot of businesses are worried about, the increasing costs around heating and lighting their premises.
Yeah, and I think the thing is around this is not competitive, right? This is about everybody taking a responsibility around the global environment, and everybody can play a small part. And as we say, no big or how small. I think the beauty of having the insights earlier in the journey or getting them flagged up at the time is that, as I said, you start to make small changes which have a massive impact overall. And I don't think it's something you would see the return on instantly, like from turning a light off overnight, but build that out over 12 months and 24 months, and we really will start to see the difference. I think the other thing I've seen in retail, which was always been interesting to me, is we worked with some of the big supermarket chains, and I was astounded in the fact that when I went in, like some of the superstores, they use 15 logbooks a week in these stores.
Wow.
So just from a paper perspective, there's such a huge benefit removing that, let alone the archiving, that you've then got to have space to store all these books daily and weekly. So yeah, we see a lot of that. And I think the other thing that, the tool offers is it's great for retailers. For example, if Easter's coming up and you're rolling out a campaign, and we used to hear an area manager would have to drive around, 30, 40 stores taking photographs of whether the POS was in place. And just to know if your Easter campaign would take 3 weeks, whereas now you can roll it out with the tool. And by 12 p.m., on the same day, on the Monday you've rolled it out, know that all your stores are compliant and everything's in place. So there's just some real benefit. And again, helps the environment that we're not on the road doing that.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so if someone's listening and they want to know more, where's the best place for them to go?
Obviously, visit the website of safetyculture.com. And we also have our page for the retail sector. So it's the Retail Sustainability Initiative. You can sign up online. The team will be more than happy to help you. As we say, we're there to onboard teams up to 10 people. Outside of that, if you need more, do let us know. And the content around the templates that we've produced to support the initiative are all available there. We also have a public library with over 100,000 different checklists, which you can draw down on, utilize, personalize. So there's lots to help and back it up. And we also offer training as well to support this for you and your team. So it should be really easy to make that move. All you need is a mobile phone and you're good to go, really.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'd love to know what you thought about today's episode. All of the links are in the show notes, by the way. So if you want to sign up to the Better Business Act and support it, if you want to take a look at Safety Culture's tools, then you can get all of the links in the show notes. And why not head over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club. Tell me how you found today's episode, what your takeaways were, what actions you're going to be taking. And of course, I love it when people share where they're listening to the podcast. So do go ahead and tag me in your pictures. I love to see people out on dog walks or chilling out at home, wherever it is that you're listening in or working away in your studio. Of course, if you have enjoyed the podcast, it would be wonderful if you could rate it. You can do so in the Spotify app or in iTunes. And in iTunes, you can even leave a review. And I absolutely love to read them. I read all of them individually. So do, if you have a moment, it makes such a difference to getting the podcast out there to more people. And of course, if you hit subscribe or follow, you'll be the first to know about every new episode. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.